Hello, Restore 7 audience. Welcome to our next episode of Someone You Should Know. I was thinking today, you might wonder, why is Johnny not doing more of these interviews? Well, I'm asking him the same thing. He's a preacher at heart, right? And so he loves to be a part of the things where he knows he's going to have lots of time to talk. And he also knows that in these interviews, what we're trying to accomplish is really draw out of people that we think you guys should know their story and their experiences, their expertise. So he figures it's better if it's just one of us drawing that out. And so he said, tag you're it. So here I am. And I'm really excited to introduce to you today Matthew and Joy Thayer. They are a couple that, like Johnny and I, they're a team. And that's one of the things I'm starting to learn and appreciate about them, and how God has put them together clearly for such a time as this, the way that God has added their strengths together to be able to pursue the passions that have been in their hearts since they were very young. And I've learned a little bit about their journey and the way that God brought them to where they are today. I've seen enough of what they have worked on, their projects, to know that they are just getting started. And so I think it's really cool to catch them at this season in their lives and hear a little bit about them, the process of how they've gotten to where they are, and specifically echoing a new narrative on the mountain of arts and entertainment. Johnny and I can teach all day long on what things could look like, should look like in an area of culture. And, like you guys, we want to hear from people that are actually doing it, and what are they learning along the way, and what are they hopeful about for the future. So if you haven't yet watched Johnny and I, the episode that we did on Up for Discussion, echoing a new narrative on the mountain of arts and entertainment, want to encourage you to watch that as well. You certainly don't have to watch it first, but it is a 1-2 punch from this area of culture. And I think it'll give you a great perspective what you're going to hear today, but also what we've previously discussed on Up for Discussion. So I want to tell you a few quick things from their bios. Joy is an award-winning producer and actress. She produced a documentary you probably, hopefully, saw called The Trump I Know. Also worked on Reawakening and The Selection Code. She was an associate producer on the incredible movie Unplanned. And she's just done, along with Matthew, hundreds of projects through a company that they co-founded together, Sparrow Pictures. And they've done corporate films, commercials, documentaries, short films. They've received so many awards. Matthew has received awards as a director. He was actually the director on The Trump I Know and the other films that I mentioned. He's won 14 Telly Awards for his scripted and documentary work, and several directing awards, as I mentioned. His passion really is to tell stories that are redemptive. And I think I can speak for both of them after viewing some other interviews that they've done, that they also share a passion to speak truth in all the ways that it can be spoken. So let's welcome Joy and Matthew. So glad you guys had time today for us.
Yeah, this is great.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having us.
Yeah, this is an honor.
Yeah.
Well, I would love to just start by asking you guys, what makes you hopeful about the mountain of arts and entertainment? Because when we talk about echoing a new narrative in the world at all, but especially in the area of Hollywood and entertainment, all the ways that we celebrate life, it seems to have been so hijacked by a not so hidden agenda. And so what makes you hopeful about arts and entertainment?
Well, I'm hopeful because, well, for one thing, the Bible says we should be hopeful because, Jesus is on the throne and he is ruling and reigning, and we are a part of, bringing that to the earth in a variety of different ways. And I think that one of the things that makes me really hopeful in that regard is that we are watching we're watching all of the other narratives fall apart. And I think that because C.S. Lewis talks about in Mere Christianity in beginning in the first chapter, actually, and he talks about universal truths and how we're kind of all hardwired because we're all made by the same guy. And so, there's this thing inside of us that desires, stories and narratives that, match that universal truth that we're built on. And we were teaching classes, about 12 years ago, 10 years ago, something like that. And we were actually telling the students then that we saw this point coming in about 10-15 years where stories were going to start just lacking substance. They were just going to either lack something that connected with that universal truth, or they were going to be too flashy and not enough substance, or they were going to be too focused on messages. And so I think that the hopeful thing is that this environment is creating a space where those of us that are engaging in story from a universal truth perspective are actually going to rise to the top, because people are going to be drawn to it. It's like that city on a hill narrative.
Yeah, I agree. God keeps telling me, when the enemy comes in like a flood, that he raises up a standard. And we're seeing that. I really feel like the industry, as we've known it up to this point, is going to fall apart, and there's going to be a whole new standard. And people that have been working in our field for a very long time are going to be able to do the stories that God has put on their hearts.
Yeah.
That's so true. And, I feel the passion behind that, because the short time that we lived in California, and we met so many Christians that had moved there from all over, and they just knew that God had put them, in Hollywood, and they would carry these scripts around, and you just felt like, what is the ceiling? And I remember hearing people say kind of, well, there's the Illuminati, there's this, there's that. And I thought, that's just so silly. This was years ago. And I thought, no, it's, we just have to do more excellent films. That's what is standing in our way. And we need more investors towards these type projects. And I realized it was not God's time.
Right.
And yet you sense that something is shifting and breaking open. And it's easy to see that, even just with you guys, just watching a little bit of your history and recent open doors or whatever. So would you guys give Restore 7 audience like an understanding of a little bit of your backgrounds? I'm going to be sarcastic here for a minute. Both of you just had the perfect childhood and an easy upbringing, and you just knew from very young exactly what you wanted to do. So you did all the right things and went through school for each of the things you're doing, and you got qualified by the world's standards. I'm just being super sarcastic here, but I love some of your story. Can you give them just a little glimpse into how God prepared you guys uniquely for what right now? And,
sure.
And in that, speak to the people that feel called to this area that maybe think they're not qualified.
Yeah. That's a loaded question.
Yeah, you should go for that. I'll follow up with mine, but you can go in your details.
I mean, so obviously we're Bible believing Christians and everything, and one of the fruits of the Spirit is long suffering, right? And so I grew up. My mom had us doing prophetic and things when I was very young. And oftentimes when you get a prophetic word, you think that's for right now and you want to make it happen and everything. And we forget about perseverance and long suffering, and that God's called us to things.
God gives us seeds.
God gives us
and
seeds.
Expects us to plant them.
And we have to, take care of them and tend to it and everything. Yeah. And so I got a seed for the industry when I was 5. My parents were a part of the arts and entertainment base on Maui, Hawaii. That was a YWAM. My mom ran the kitchen. My dad did the transportation, and I fell in love with Jesus and entertainment way back then. And I realized the power of entertainment to change the atmosphere. And
because you used to do like little I Love Lucy skits.
I had a captive audience. Everybody's waiting for their food in the kitchen, and I just did a little song and a dance, and you make everybody laugh. And it was really fun. And and I just saw God was in a good mood. And, these were people that were coming to ministry school because they want to change the world and they want to impact everything. And I felt like God was just like, I'm just partner with me and enjoy, what I bring. And so I got the scripture, delight yourself in the Lord and he'll give you the desires of your heart, by Dick Mills back in 1993. And so it's just been one of those passions I've had, but I made some poor choices growing up. I got pregnant at 15. I had my daughter when I was 16. I had a severely disabled son when I was 20 years old. And I put some of my dreams and passions aside. And I went on a missions trip down to San Francisco where we were feeding the homeless. And I looked across the street and there are women in ball gowns and men that are just dressed to the nines. And I said, Lord, I have nothing to offer them. I don't have a ministry tool,
because you were giving sandwiches and socks to the homeless people.
Yeah. So I had a tool to be able to talk to them. And I realized most of them were actually already saved, that they were stuck in, mental illness or drug addiction, and they needed some access to more long-term care than just trying to get them saved. But I was looking at these people that, they were financially well off, but they were emotionally and spiritually poor. And so God said, why don't you go back to school?
One thing, because one thing that she said to God when she was mentioning this, forgetting to mention this, but she said, I have no sandwich for them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And she looked across at the people that were poor in spirit, going like, I've got a sandwich for these people over here who really need, mental help.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And but they
they're
already believe in
momentary
Jesus. You know what I mean? But then these people over here who could give a rip about God and are, poor spiritually, I don't have a sandwich for them. And so that was like such a profound moment in the story that she told me, because I wasn't around then.
You're like Johnny and I, we remember each other's stories.
Yeah.
Well, this is great.
And so now I've got a couple kids, and I went back to college and I got my degree in media communications. It took me a very, very long time to do that. And it was one of those persevering kind of things. I would take
because of Sawyer.
I would take a semester's worth of classes, and I'd have to drop the classes because he'd get sick or something. And so it was a lot of communication with the dean and of everybody, so I could redo all the classes the next semester. And I just kept pursuing this. And so when we met, I had planned on moving down to Pasadena and was going to go to Cheon's church down there and everything.
And we were living in Redding.
I was living in Redding, California at the time. And I had a lot of open doors down in the industry, and God said, I want you to stay in Redding and I want you to build the film industry from Redding. And I was so frustrated. I said, like, finally, I have all these open doors. I've done all this stuff and everything. And he said, I want you to do this. And at the time I didn't understand fully why. And so I argued with him for a couple of weeks. And ultimately I said, you must see something I don't see. And I know that you're good and that you have plans that are for me. So I'm willing to stay here, thinking I'm going to stay here for like 6 months, and then I'm going to go down there. And in the meantime, I meet Matt, and
like a couple of weeks later, she meets me.
Yeah. And he said, oh, I would, and then we just became best friends. Mm-hmm. And he goes, I would totally move down there and let's do all this. And so, Matt came to Redding to go to ministry school. And so he finished out ministry school and we blended our families together. And then I said, I think we're supposed to start a corporate and commercial company. Mm-hmm. And Matt said, that's not filmmaking. That's a corporate and commercial company. And I said, I know, but rather than us paying to do short films, you should get paid to do commercial films. And then that will lead to something else. Yeah. So he trusted me. And we've done thousands of corporate and commercial projects for all different kinds of companies, very well known. And then I had the opportunity to go work on I Can Only Imagine. And Daryl Lefevre is one of our really good friends. And he's the main producer for Kingdom Pictures. And they do the Irwin Brothers projects and everything. So I was brought on to that project. And as the production secretary, and during that time, my father had cancer. And so I had to go back home and help care for him. And he passed away in the middle of production. And so when I came back on the project, I didn't have a job anymore because I gave my job to my production secretary back home and had her come out and take my position. And so I came back out and they had me being the cast driver. And then I was meeting with the investors on that project. And so that led to doing Unplanned. So Unplanned wasn't a project that I was super excited about. I didn't want to do a controversial project. I wanted to do family, fun, friendly, all that kind of stuff. But I knew the agenda that they were having in the pro-abortion world. And because my son being born disabled, they had offered to let him pass after he was born. Now, this is what we call after birth abortions in California, and people don't understand that. And then as his life went on, we were offered to let him die several times because you had the right to euthanize him because of Terry Shrivo's case. And he had no ability to feed himself or take care of himself. And so I was considered his life support. So we could just put him on hospice, and stop feeding him, which would just be, we're removing life support. And so people didn't understand how our world is so twisted, and these euthanasia laws had crept in.
So pro-life was something very big.
Pro-life is something I was very passionate about. So we both got very involved in that project, and I was one of the associate producers on the project, brought in some financing for it, and then I acted in it. And then our team had went out there and done the behind the scenes on the project and everything. In the meantime, it was this was another one of those things that happened. My son was coming to end of life. So now he was almost 21 years old. And so on that project, I was home a lot, taking care of him, knowing that this was either we were going to have a miracle and my life was going to change, or he was going to pass and my life was going to change. And so during that time, God told me that, I paid for his healing here on earth just as much as I paid for him to be in heaven with me. And so I said, okay, we're going to do this. So it's been a hard, long journey to do all of these things that God's put in our hearts. But we kept saying this was our mission field. I never felt called like my parents to go to India and Africa and different things. Not that we won't do that, but it just didn't feel like our mission field. The media mountain has always been our mission field. And then after my son passed away, it was a very difficult year. That was 2019 was a very, very difficult year. And 2020, I think, okay, I'm going to do something and, figure out who I am and all that. And the world just went completely sideways. And I ended up producing the Trump I Know during that time. And we went to 9 different states. We got introduced to the first family and just a bunch of experiences. But this is where one of the first things that just to back it up, one of the first parts I ever went out for was Esther in One Night with the King many years ago. And so God taught me a lot about Esther.
And when you say went out, she actually made it into like the top 7 before she was cut. And this is at like 2,000 women. So,
Incredible.
Yeah.
And so I learned a whole lot about Esther. And Lou Ingalls had prophesied over me. He goes, whether you get the part or you don't get the part, he goes, you're going to save thousands in this generation to come. And I didn't realize that what he was talking about at the time. And so then it comes to doing projects like this, and people would say, wow, you're going to commit career suicide. If you do these kinds of projects and you do controversial things, you'll never work in this industry again. And so you have to that's really serious. But I'm more afraid of the Lord than I am of what other people can do. And they're not in charge of my career anyway. And so we just said, these stories need to be told. And then you get the strength and the courage to do the right thing. And then God brings in more opportunities. And I think, as you stated earlier, I think we're just getting started, because now we have a path and a journey from the industry that we were building in Northern California. We have that capability now to take and do multiple film projects, not just multiple commercial projects. And so we'll be able to start creating a lot of content that shows the world the truth and that God is good. And there's going to be more people that have the courage to not be concerned about a paycheck from somebody that owns their story to being like, God will be my provider.
Yeah. Wow. Incredible. Jump in there.
That's just one half of the story.
That's the brief.
Yeah. Wow.
So let's see. I grew up loving movies and Disney. My mom and dad, back when Disney was like normal,
or at least we thought
or
it
at least
was.
we thought it was.
Right. Ignorance is bliss.
Yeah, right. But back when we would go to the movies every summer, and we would watch like Peter Pan or the re-release of Cinderella or whatever, and those were always just really fond memories. And then I remember when Aladdin came out, and I went to the theater like 3 times to go see Aladdin. I was like 13, I think, when it came out.
Wow.
And the credits start rolling, and it kind of dawned on my 13-year-old brain at that time, like, these are adults and they're getting paid to make cartoons. Like, that's rad. So I started going like, I need to get in on this. So I started,
I can draw.
yeah, I can draw. And I always had drawn and everything. And so I started drawing more. But what I found out and I even actually tried to go to animation school, computer animation school, back in the year 2000 after I graduated. But what I started realizing was that I was much more of a storyteller. Like, I wasn't like animators or actors, really. I mean, they love to sit there with pencils and make things move, and I was never really into that as much as I was into, like, this is the character and this is the backstory and this is the world that they live in. And, I wanted to, create worlds. And so, but then I got married young and had a couple kids, and then, was like, well, I got to go and get a regular job. And so I
Grow
started
up and be an adult.
right. So I started selling mortgages and doing escrow, and my soul dies. And when your soul dies, you get involved into crap you shouldn't. And so my marriage imploded, and I ended up kind of, flat on my back. I'd went to Reading, went to the Bethel School of Ministry, and I'm laying there flat on my back and going like, Lord, what am I supposed to do? And he's like, well, the thing that I put in your heart that you've always wanted to do, but you've never done, you could do that. And I was like, well, okay, touche. So he started to.
What else was he talking to you about that year?
Well, he was talking a lot about joy that year.
Wow.
Yeah, and Nehemiah 8:10. I even have an email address to this day, Nemo 8:10, and was talking a lot about joy and strength and everything else. And then all of a sudden, I meet her, and I'm like, of course, your name is Joy. So, so yeah, and. But what was kind of crazy too is that at that point, when I said yes to the Lord and said, okay, well, I'll do this. I could tell you, I could take you pretty much to the exact spot and row where I was sitting at Bethel Church, and all of a sudden God's just drops full scenes into my head. And I start watching this on the inside of my forehead, and I'm like, this is pretty good. But how do I get this out of my head? Like, I didn't know screenwriting. I'd drawn, and I loved stories, and my roommate, was going to film school. And so, like, I've watched a bunch of esoteric movies from Kubrick and Lynch and, all this other stuff, but I've never really actually said like, oh, I could be a film director. I was like always more focused on animation. And so all of a sudden, like, I have these scenes in my head. What am I supposed to do with it? So, I was homeschooled my entire life. I was homeschooled all 12 years. And so self-education was nothing new. So I decided.
We actually debate how many years you were homeschooled, because you started like in the 3rd grade and you like.
Yeah, well, I skipped like kindergarten and 1st grades. It was like, because whatever. Anyway, so
we understand that.
Yeah, well, you know how it is.
It's homeschooling. Like, it's very organic. Yeah.
Yeah, with homeschool, it's like, it's like you look at your kids, you're like, what grade are you in? And they're like, oh, I know. How old are you? And you're like 9. You're like, you must be in 9th grade. I mean, I don't know, whatever, right? But so anyway, so I went down to Barnes and Noble and I bought a screenwriting book. And Joy and I had been hanging out, and I started sharing with her what I was seeing. I
was like, "That's pretty good."
And she's like, "That's pretty good." And I said, "I know, I think it is." And so
I'm a hard one to
she is, and so like she said, she went out for one night with a king, and this was like we met like 2 months before that movie came out, and she had shown me the script, one of the earlier versions of the script that she had, and I was like, "Oh, this looks really good. This is kind of cool." And they were kind of had this. The script had some elements of the Lord of the Rings, which I was totally into, and
Like a butterfly.
yeah, it had some stuff in it that I was like, "Going, okay, I can see where they're doing with this. This is really cool." We went and we were like all excited to go see this movie, so we went and saw it. I think the day it came out.
I took like my whole women's group from the church with me. There was
who had all been praying for her, for when she went out with the part and all this other stuff. And we went to the theater, and we walked out and we were just like, wow, it was bad. It was just bad.
I was embarrassed.
And so like we started talking, and
I didn't even act in it and I was embarrassed.
And we started talking, like, why did this suck? Like, why was this,
Wow, yeah.
And so Jeremiah 33:3 is one of my life verses. And so I was like, all right, well, Lord, why do Christian movies suck?
This is exactly. That's not like putting it mildly, or that's what Matt came out, and he's like, Lord, why does this suck?
And he said, "Oh, son, that's a much larger conversation. Let's unfold that." And so he began to through the process of learning the screenwriting and the editing and everything else, and really kind of digging into it and learning more about story, which I have a natural knack for. Like, it's just like I was saying, like when I was doing animation or wanting to do animation, I was more concerned with the story elements of things. And so I began to look more into and researching story and what that takes, and all this other stuff. And I started being able to actually discern, going like, oh, well, Christian movies do it this way, and
they're heavy on theme.
And you look at it like Aristotle's like hierarchy of story, and are really heavy on the theme. As long as everything serves the message. It's like it really. And when actually plot and story is supposed to be the first, and then character, and then theme. And so everything gets all twisted up, and then it falls apart. And then the world is over here, and it's like, as long as it looks cool, and it's like, well, that's why you have movies like Pacific Rim, or even Avatar to a certain extent, because it's like it's very much, well, and in certain cases now the world has gotten even worse, I think, than Christians were on a message. And they just are shoving messages down your throat. And so that's not why people go to movies. It's not why people engage with story. And so anyway, so those were things that God began to unveil to us, and it was really kind of crazy, because we kind of sat there and we felt like we were kind of like this island, and going like, does anybody else see this? And then we started meeting other people down in Hollywood that had been a part of the Hollywood system, that were like covert Christians, and were working inside. And we can tell you tons of stories of people who had changed scripts, or made sure that certain books didn't get made into movies and things like that. I mean, people look at the product that Hollywood is putting out, and well, at least especially back then, I would say like 5, 6, 7 years ago, and they would be like, oh, it's so ungodly, and we're like, you have no idea, it could be way worse, because there's so many people that are actually kind of helping to be that salt and that light that's helping to preserve it.
That's encouraging.
Yeah. And so, but anyway, so we, started, taking the stuff that we were learning, and we were asked by the church to teach classes. So we taught classes on filmmaking to the students, and we would take them and we'd kind of walk them through the process of making a short film.
Oh, cool.
And through like 9 months. And and it was cool because and we had to fight for it too, because even within the circles that we were at, where we were very free and a lot of freedom, they were still kind of like questioning this whole thing, where it's like, okay, de-emphasize the message and focus on the story.
Well, what makes a Christian film was one of the things that came up. And so we would always say, well, what makes a Christian plumber? That was how
There you go.
Yeah.
Because I just want you to come fix my pipes and make sure it works. And so hopefully they're a moral, ethical person,
Yeah.
but they happen to be a Christian and their job is being a plumber, And so what makes Christian filmmakers are that you are a quality person, that you're honoring contracts, that you're honoring the story, you're honoring your actors, and you're
Taking care of
honoring
people.
what comes out on screen. It's not just that the theme of the film is an
Right.
overtly Christian theme,
Yes.
And so we would walk through that, and all of a sudden they're like, "Oh,
Well,
okay."
yeah, and it was kind of it was crazy too, because like there was several people that were going to church there that'd been called to ministry school that were from the industry
Mhm.
that were vastly more qualified than we were
Mhm.
to teach these classes. And I remember driving up to the class one day, and I'm going like, God, why? Like, why me? Like, I feel like I'm just learning this stuff, and now I'm teaching it and everything else. And he's like, well, you're willing. And I'm like, wow, okay. That's it, And so, and he had also told me like certain things. There's so many stories. I mean, that we should do more podcasts. But I mean,
Yeah.
there's so
There's lots
many
of stories.
things that I think would be encouraging to people. Is that, I mean, he's, you just listen to the Lord. I mean, the Lord told me one time I was focusing too heavy on some political stuff, and like, it was back in 2010, like the Tea Party and everything, and I was like, I'm really into that. I love free market economics, and I love, I've followed presidential politics since I was 6, like that kind of stuff. And but he told me, he's like, I haven't given that to you yet. He's like, you need to. He haven't called you that yet. He says, but if you put as much effort and energy into learning filmmaking as you are this, he said, I'll open up the doors. And that year I said, okay. And that was in January. And that year, like, all of a sudden we got asked to do the class. We did our first short film. Like, all of a sudden, boom, 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 all of these doors started opening. And then we started winning awards.
Our first short film went viral. It's got over 8 million views on YouTube.
Went viral. I mean, our students, it was cool. Our Christian students from ministry school were winning other film festivals.
Yeah.
So the film
all over the United States.
And and so like this one girl, she made a short film about like Alice in Wonderland, but it was like a kind of a spin on Alice in Wonderland, but it had like these kind of Christian tones to it. But then she put it into this film festival. It doesn't mention God at all, but like there's this truth on it. So it, it wins.
It does really well.
And so, so that was really cool to see, because we were able to kind of test out some of these techniques with our students and see it actually working.
One thing on it, have you bring up though really quick is because we were talking about earlier in my case of like the long suffering and the perseverance and everything. But when you went to ministry school, what happened? How many people gave you a prophetic word?
Oh yeah, so I went to ministry school, and it was when the iPhones had just come out, so I had an iPhone. You had a recorder on your phone, so you're like, and I'm all like armed with the iPhone because people give you prophetic words. If you ever been to Bethel, like, I mean, basically you just walk in the door and somebody's going to hit you with a word. You know what I mean? It's like, they're just slung all over the place. And so, and so everybody's testing and trying and everything. And so I went to school there, and I'm thinking like, oh, I'm going to get some words, about being a filmmaker.
You're so excited.
And I got a ton of words that year. Not a single one mentioned being a filmmaker.
So you come home and you're like in a mood.
I started getting more and more upset, as the year went on, and I'm getting like, like, you're going to be a businessman, like all this stuff.
Matt's
and I'm like, I don't like business.
That.
Like, yeah, exactly. It's like,
that's for me. Not
yeah, right. Yeah. You need to go back and try again. And well, anyway, so I asked God, I'm like, why am I not getting any words about being a filmmaker? And he's like, I called you to be a filmmaker. Why do you need somebody else to tell you?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, all right. Yeah. Well put. So I stopped asking for those, and I just, forged ahead. And And so when people ask me like, well, would you do anything else? I'm like, no, because that's not God told me this is what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
So we started doing the corporate
and
commercial
it's always been
stuff.
fun and easy, right? Life has been like super
It's been super fun, super easy. But we were taking like the kids, like our kids wanted to do, acting and things like that, and they were very cheap actors, and so
right.
Yeah, so we were like, we started making short films with them. So like Joyce said, our first one went viral, won several awards with other ones, and so it was just like always trying to figure out like, well, what do we have and what can we do? And I was really inspired by like Robert Rodriguez. I don't know if you know who that is, but he's a director, and his first big hit was called El Mariachi. And it kind of took Sundance by storm. It was like the early 90s, and he had made the whole film, I think, with like $7,000. I mean, it was like by himself.
I think that he also like had to like donate blood.
Yeah, he was donating plasma and blood.
So like, he could raise the money.
Yeah, he was like part of like drug experiments and stuff to raise the money and things. Anyway, so but what I was really inspired with his story was that he came from a large Catholic family down in South Texas, and he started doing short films with his brothers and sisters, and that's kind of where he got started. I'm like, well, I've got a bunch of kids. Like, well, it's just
there you go.
And so
some people have football teams and baseball teams, basketball teams. We're like, we have a film team. Let's do it.
And the goal was always to like I always put it as my goal. Like I wanted to be somebody that somebody like eventually like a Steven Spielberg or something like that would be like, hey, I want to have coffee with you. Like you're the way what you're doing is interesting.
That was in your goal book.
That was a goal book, right? And so and
now he's setting different goals.
Yeah, but what was crazy was, like Joyce said, we started doing corporate and commercial stuff, and she talked me into doing that because I never wanted to do that because it's like, well, that's not filmmaking. And she's like, well, you need to direct more. And I'm like,
and I said, if you can't get good at directing 30 seconds, nobody's going to want to watch 90 minutes.
Well, no. Well, and yeah. And so that's what happened was I was like, well, God put me into these situations that were very unorthodox to teach me how to be a director and how to be a storyteller. And I was like, well, I'll just try to figure out how to do it in 30 seconds. And how do you tell a complete beginning, middle, and end in 30 seconds and keep people entertained? And so experimented a lot with those. And then
we started doing campaigns.
And we started doing campaigns.
Which are multiple commercials. And then we do brand stories. And we got into a bunch of.
But it was always from the standpoint of, making relationships with, people in the industry. So we have, made relationships with producers and other people and actors and stuff, and aiming towards, Hollywood. And then after Unplanned, and one of the producers from Unplanned met Laura Trump and we kind of found out like all these stories about the Trump family that nobody knew about. And he's like, well, we should do this documentary. And so they called me up and they said, hey, do you want to do direct a documentary on Trump? And I remember in that moment going, wow, that's going to draw a line in the sand. Because you're going like, I've been focused on getting towards Hollywood, right?
Right.
And this all happened in a flash. Like it was just nuts, right? I'm sitting in Reading, and I'm sitting on my porch, and my buddies are asking me if I want to direct this, and I'm having this whole dialogue in literally a split second. And God shows me, basically, he lifts me up. I look down in California, down the landscape, and I see Hollywood. And he says, why are you concerned about currying favor from an industry that's dying? And then he kind of like turns my head, and I swivel and I look over towards the middle of the United States, and he says, that's where your audience is. Get to know them. And I was like, okay. So I said I was in. I was like, whatever this is, whatever's going to happen, it's going to lead to the next thing that God has for us. So, all right, let's go.
Yeah.
And so we made the documentary about Trump, and that was a whole God thing. Yeah. Like our entire crew was Christian.
We should just do one episode just on
we should do, yeah. But the whole, it was crazy. Like the whole, like our crew was all Christian. We all did communion.
We did communion
every night. And the reason why is because we didn't know what we were going to be filming next. I mean, we had an open door with Laura Trump, and she was going to open up some other doors. But then, you get down there, and then there's politics, and there's certain forms you got to fill out and everything else. And so we're just kind of sitting there.
Mm-hmm.
I told my crew, I said, this is going to be like a wildlife documentary. I said, is the pride going to show up? Are we going to see the big lion? I don't know. And so I remember there were some agonizing moments about, 2/3 through the film, filming the film, where I didn't know if we were going to actually have anything. And nothing seemed to be working out. And then God just would open up doors, and we met Paula White, and we met and it was all kind of just in these very bizarre ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they were all God divine appointments.
And we end up, interviewing the president and the White House. And even that didn't go well. And that's a long story.
It went well. It didn't go as planned.
It didn't go as planned.
It went really well. Yeah.
And in the moment, it didn't
feel... In the moment, I was disappointed.
Sure.
Really bad. I called Joy, and I was basically crying. And so...
And if you ever seen a grown man cry, it's not pretty.
But it was crazy. And but we prayed, and God gave me... I would wake up in the morning, with answers to problems in the edit room, trying to figure out how we were going to do certain things. And all of a sudden I'd wake up, and I'd go over to my editor's house and be like, hey, I think this is how we should do it. And he's like, that'll work. Boom, boom, boom. And we just, and we produced that whole documentary in 90 days.
Which is insane.
What?
Yeah.
The whole thing was done in 90 days.
Yeah. Even the composing, we had a composer on, that had to do
and
from scratch. And
that's why to this day, my favorite review on Amazon is a 1-star review. Mm-hmm. And people are like, why a 1-star review? And I'm like, because it says this thing was completely staged. And I'm like, wow, if you think it's that good, then I'm going to take that as a compliment, because I was there and there was nothing about that whole thing that was staged at all.
Whoa.
No. Even the things we tried to stage couldn't be staged.
Oh, no.
So just nothing.
Yeah. And then we released it, in October 2020, when everything got censored and banned. And so that, that's why there's so many people that still to this day, they're like,
where do I watch it?
Where do I watch this? Or they watch it and they're like, this was so good. How have I not seen this before? Why isn't anybody talking about this? And it's like, well, because it, and it was funny too, because our team was all despondent about it. And God told me at that moment, he's like, this was for after.
Yeah. That's it.
Anyway, this was for after the election. There was something else.
You said that early on. You're like, this isn't for this time period.
Wow. God just talks to me in
you said God's
very odd ways.
Oh, you guys, this is just so powerful to hear. I'm literally teary-eyed, because I'm always kind of listening for the story behind the story, right? And y'all are giving us the story behind the story, but even the story behind that is just God walking with both of you, first individually and then together, as he brought y'all together. And he's telling a huge story that we all get to be a part of, especially as we are willing, as you said, Matthew, and we just keep saying yes. And it's not about us doing everything right and being qualified in the world's eyes. And the shift, I think, that we're all a part of, really in every area of culture right now, is so he's positioning us. Mm-hmm. And I see how he's positioning you guys, and how you are so, I say this a lot, but you cannot give away what you don't have. And so you can't tell a story that that he's not telling, really, if you're authentic, and you guys clearly are. And so you're looking always for the story. What is he saying? What is he doing? And that rarely sounds religious or biblical, or it is the first family story. It's he's in all of it. He's in all of it. And how you stewarded your own stories with him is just playing out. And I guess I wanted people to kind of hear that part of my processing of listening to you guys, because so many people are in different stages of their story. And yet they know that they're called to be a part of telling the stories. Yeah. And they need permission. And you guys, you both had to clearly work through God giving each one of you permission at such key junctures in your own lives and your own relationship with him. And now you've got this huge green light from him. He's just given you permission to just like move forward. And clearly too, Matthew, like the business part is the part maybe you didn't know, but there's the most creatives, I guess I'll generalize here, but most creatives, they're not good at the follow through and the admin side of things. And I see how God's like given y'all just strategy between the two of you and building a team around you. And obviously that needs to increase as the more that y'all get to steward and multiple projects at the same time and who they are and all of that. But okay, I'm just rambling now, but
no, that's awesome.
I would love to hear, just as we get ready to close up, two things. How can we support you guys? I mean, you are being positioned, you are on the front lines. What's next? What are you excited about? What can we get behind and how can we get behind it?
Yeah.
And how can we stay in touch with what you guys are doing, you know?
Yeah.
Well, let's see.
So I think that right now, I think that if people are praying, my parents always said that if you're going to be on the front lines, have watchmen on the walls.
Yeah,
and so if that's all somebody can do is pray for us, is pray that we do have the right team of people and that we surround ourselves with people that are like-minded, like-hearted, that are unafraid of what they see going on, but they keep their eyes on the Lord. I think that's really, really key and important. Pray for our family. And then the finances for these projects, we're not studio funded and we are not getting dark money to tell these stories. You know, I raise most of the money on all the projects that we work on. And we've got 5 projects that we can do this year if we had the funding for those projects. And people don't always understand the value in the stories that we're telling from the finance side of stuff. And Hollywood is putting out films that are, $50 million, $100 million projects. And we're over there going, I need $5 million to put this thing together. And we're still, trying to do this on a shoestring budget for some of these projects. So if people want to support us financially, there's a few different ways, but we have a locals page that we started. And so people can donate and that will keep our lights on and will help if they want to, give us a substantial donation, we can get you the contact for that.
Hey, if anybody's out there that, is an investor or, is,
we've
has
got some
the ability
great projects to invest in. We've got a slate.
Unfortunately, I'm not going to give you pitches here online because they're really good ideas and they could be taken but I have shared these ideas with several people, and there's people that are well to do that are like, we want to give you money, but maybe it's such an odd time right now because there's so many people that have the means, but their assets are down. And so like liquidating assets at this point is not something that's usually a good thing to do when your market's down, stuff like that. So there's times where it's like, we've talked to people and they're like, those are amazing ideas, but I'm not in the position, to liquidate certain things.
They might just need to trust the Lord with their assets. I don't know.
But we have we have a couple documentaries that we're working on. We've got one that's people are going to hear about. We're working on that in a few months. We've got a project that we're working on putting on Angel Studios.
We have two for Angel.
2 of those.
Awesome.
One of those is an animation, an animated project.
So if you want to get on the ground floor of something like The Chosen, like give me a call.
Now, when you say get in on the ground floor, what do you want them to call you about?
Like if they want to give us some, we've got we need to raise about $250,000. We've got $86,000 so far. To create what's called a torch. Or basically like what Dallas Jenkins did with The Shepherd. If people have seen the short film that started The Chosen, So that's the way that their model works. And so we have a short film.
So you're looking
that,
for donors and investors.
and donors and investors. And so, we have an investment model. And then we also have an animated, because I actually illustrated some children's books. We didn't get into that, but I illustrated children's books for Danny and Sherry Silk. I don't know if you know who Danny and Sherry Silk are.
Yeah.
So I illustrated their children's books. And so we're working on taking those and turning them into an animated series. And we have we basically have the plan and the team to do that. And we just need the startup capital for that. So we need about $75,000 for
75 for that torch.
And
then
so
what happens is what you do is you build a torch, which is original footage, original music, all that kind of stuff. And then they put it on the platform, and then it goes to the crowdfunding and investor phase for the rest of everything.
Right.
So for that, you see the movie David, that you'll see Kirk Cameron doing a lot of ads for the animated series David. So they started with a little tiny short animation, and that would be like what you would raise the initial funds for, and then the crowd gets behind it, and they can either donate to it or they can do investment finances. So at this point, where if investors want to come in, we would have it where investors could fund like the whole $75,000 for if they felt just called to family friendly content, because we feel like we have to, we need to create content for different age groups. And stuff, because if you watch Netflix, they got stuff for 2-year-olds, they've got stuff for 10-year-olds, they got stuff for 18, all that kind of stuff. So our projects would actually target different demographics, and the teams that we would build around those projects would allow us to do that.
Yep. That's incredible. Okay, so I think it's so important for our audience to remember this is kingdom work. When you invest or donate towards changing the narrative and allowing us to advance the kingdom is the king's domain. Jesus' better way of doing everything. So we've got two people right here on the front lines who are tried and proven, integrous, who have projects waiting to advance the kingdom with. There couldn't be a better place to get behind financially. And anyway, okay, so keep going. What else, Matthew?
Well, and that's the thing, is that I think that those of us who are Christians, right? Because even Christians are in two camps, right? It's like Christians that believe that we're at the end of the world, or people that believe that we're actually part of establishing the kingdom on the planet. It's like those of us that, it's kind of crazy, because I feel like those of us that are positioning ourselves with hope are actually going to launch past all of these people that are bury their stuff in the backyard. It's like, and because that's just, well, not only is, I think it's just a law of how the world works, right? If you position yourself correctly, all of a sudden you're going to get drafted in, and people that aren't positioned correctly are going to get left behind. But also it's a part of scripture, because Jesus talks about it in the parables. It's like, I've given you these talents, and there's so many people that are right now that are just scared and they're holding back, because they're like, oh my gosh, AI, oh my gosh, like the shot, oh my gosh, the World Economic Forum, oh my gosh, Noah Yuval Harari is the devil, you know what I mean? Like all this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, they're heinous people. I mean, but the problem is that the people, they're like, well, yeah, but Jesus is bigger. I mean, Jesus is the one that's on the throne, and he's God. And like, do we believe the scriptures or not? And are we going to position ourselves in our heart and our art, from that standpoint? And like I said, 15 years ago, when we were teaching these classes and we were teaching these students, because these students would come to us and they would be like, they would either have something that was like, this comedy about the ministry school, and like nobody else would watch it, like, you know what I mean, because it wasn't funny to anybody else, or it would be something that was like so myopically focused on, well, we have to save people, or talk about this, and I'm like, what, I just want you to entertain me, so just go back, rewrite this, and tell me a story, and at least get me to pay attention to you for 8 minutes. And I always equated it from the standpoint of like the with golf, right? You learn how to hit the ball straight before you throw power behind it. You know, Steven Spielberg created Jaws before he created Schindler's List. And so there's steps to this, right? And but God is positioning us when we were doing these classes. I saw in 15 years, I said, you guys need to understand that you have to learn how to do this, because at some point people are going to be looking for entertaining people that know how to tell stories that contain truth. And it's going to happen in about 15 years. And here we are about 15 years later, and look at what's happening. We've got a glut of stuff that's all over streaming that people are still going like, there are all these streaming channels. And it's the same thing that happened, 20 years ago, where there's like, I got 250 cable channels and nothing to watch.
Yeah.
Because nobody's watching it, because it's all drivel. It's all mass marketed, mass produced. It's not connecting with anything that's actually coming from the universal values that God built this whole entire universe on.
Kind of like vegetables that have no nutrients inside of them.
It's just,
you can eat it, but it's not adding any value to your life.
It's like a bunch of celery. It's like, it's just vapid of nutrition. And people are going to start gravitating, because that's what happens. People start gravitating away from those things, and they start looking, because we're story creatures. We're creatures that need story. That's why history is created as a story. It's why the Bible is written as a story. It's story. We need that. And people don't understand that we need it. Like, that's the thing that I think a lot of people, they kind of apologize for when they, it's like, well, I'm just watching this for entertainment. It's like, no, you're not. You're watching it because you need it. You need a story, because we see the world in such a linear fashion, and it doesn't make sense to us, because we're like, well, I understand that love exists, and I understand that justice exists, but I don't see it every day. I don't see it happen. I don't see these things. And so it's confusing, and I'm not able to make sense of it. But then a story gives you all of that in about 2 hours or 10 hours if you're watching a limited series or whatever. But you see these principles laid out, and you walk away going like, oh, okay, yeah, you're right. I can go and face my my boss who is, irate and or whatever. I can go and I can deal with my spouse. I can have these hope, because I see these principles laid out before me. And so it kind of reorients our heart. And that's what stories do. And when we don't have that, which is why what I think what we're facing now is really a crisis of story in a way, where it's like, we don't have that. And then also, the stories that are told are built off of all of these different philosophies, naturalism and rationalism, empiricism, and all of these things that actually end up eating themselves or committing suicide on themselves, and people or leading to just vapidness and vacantness, right? It's leading to no God. And people are going to start connecting with these stories that I think that us and other really great Christian storytellers are starting to kind of get
Link
this
arms.
And starting to link arms. And I think we're walking into a new golden age.
So if there's people that want to donate to these or projects, or if they want to invest in these projects and they want to hear more about those opportunities, they can find us on sparrowlocals.com, sparrowrumble.com. They can email us at info@sparrowpictures, and we can have greater conversations.
And if if you know Johnny and Elizabeth, they can give you our contact information too. So.
All right, good. That doesn't mean you can email us if you don't know us, but if we know you, yes, reach out and we will make the contact. Goodness. Well, there's so many other questions. I'm going to have to do some follow-up with you guys, but I see how God, his face as creator is who we were meant to encounter through all the ways that we're entertained and all the ways that we, sports, competitions, food, culinary experiences, of course, art, and of course, movies and film, what we've been talking about today. And the face of God as creator, like his most amazing creations, sunrises and sunsets, he didn't sign his name. Like there wasn't like, by the way, I'm God and you should know me and I'll save you for eternity. He just loved us with his creativity without an agenda. And I think the permission to like create within the boundaries of, we're not reflecting the enemy who steal, kill, and destroy, but there's a whole lot of, creative flow apart from that we can be a part of as creators, reflecting that aspect of who God is. And so I hope, listen, in fact, would one of you guys or both of you pray for people that are called to this, either to help fund and finance it, or those that are called to actually play a role on the Mountain of Arts Entertainment?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
I think it was Bobby Connors. My mom sent me something recently, and he was talking about this woman and that didn't have any money, and she had some twins that were disabled, and they just had these issues, and God told Bobby to give all his money away to somebody, and this lady had given Bobby her last $20, and he was just over there going, Lord, I can't take her money. And he said, that's my money. That's not her money. And so I think that when it comes to sacrifice and people that are wealthy, sometimes their sacrifice looks different than somebody that has $20.
Yeah.
But I still think that it's not our money, no matter if a sacrifice for one person is $200,000, $2 million, or if it's $20. I think God still calls us to sacrifice and trust him with the return.
Yeah.
And that return can be financial or non-monetary or whatever, because God will take care of us however he wants to take care of us. So,
and real quick, to those that are looking at doing into this industry and wanting to be a part of this.
Yeah.
Number one is just the willingness to answer
and
the
it's a lot
call.
of work.
Because if you feel like that's what's on your heart, then you need to trust that. Because God is the one that, like Joy said, it's not your dreams, it's his dreams, and he puts them inside of you. And so and that's what I remember one time having it out with him, going like, God, when is this going to happen? And he's like, I put those dreams inside of your heart. Don't you think I care about them more than you do? And so you have to be willing and trust him on the journey, but also understand it's going to be a journey. And like I said earlier, God gives us seeds. And a lot of times, especially in a prophetic culture, people get like, well, I see Hollywood over you, and we live in this, and we combine the prophetic culture with a microwave culture, and it just doesn't work. And not all the time. Like certain times there's now words where all of a sudden it happens, and that's true. But we have a relationship oriented God. And so he's not a vending machine. He's not somebody that you punch a bunch of buttons and all of a sudden something comes out. It's an organic relationship. And so whatever journey he has you on is the journey that he has you on. And so you have to just embrace that and trust him, but allow that seed and protect that seed, because if you feel like that's been given to you, then you need to nurture it. You need to get, figure it out. Like if you're somebody like me that can get books, my Amazon account is, I think I have so many books,
daily.
What's really great about these days is that there's lots of classes online. It's a lot easier to find information, watch the stuff that's on, Blu-rays or behind the scenes type of stuff, just get involved in the art itself and learn how it works and find ways to get involved in it and just experiment and try stuff. But, it's not something, it's a skill. It's a craft, like Joy says, one of my favorite things that she says is, what want me to say it, or are you going to say it?
I don't know what you're going to say.
Okay.
I'm trying to.
So she says that if all of a sudden God said to you that, yeah, you want to go ahead?
So I typically equate it is, if God called you to be a surgeon, you wouldn't wake up tomorrow and start cutting on your friends. So if he's called you to art and entertainment, it is one of the hardest industries to get into. And they are the people that are skilled because they've put in hours of education and they've learned a lot. So no matter how you need to get educated, for whatever part of the craft, whether it's a DP, I do the producing side, a lot of admin work. I've had to take classes on weekends because, again, I was raising kids and things. Figure out what you're called to and just commit to it. And then I always say, remove ideology out of your head, because we get so screwed up on how it's supposed to look instead of just going, we're going to get there kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then on the investment side, I know I talked about sacrifice and everything, but we have worked so hard on the business side of this industry for a very long time now. Is I really feel like while there's going to be investors out there that are nervous, especially right now because the world is in this strange place that none of us have ever been in before, I really see this as a massive opportunity that God is going to take the wealth of the wicked and laid up for the righteous. And I think that investing in something that makes you a little nervous actually is going to have the biggest return on investment too. And I think that because he's strategically given us ideas on how to do that as well.
So, but we should pray.
And pray? Lord, we just thank you so much for Johnny and Elizabeth. We thank you for their ministry. We thank you for their courage and their boldness. We thank you for their audience that takes the time to listen to shows like this, and that you have people divinely appointed to hear this word today, and that you are calling them to the arts and entertainment industry in one form or another. There's a place for electricians, for painters, for musicians, for everybody in this field. And we just thank you, Lord, that this mountain is a mountain that will influence every other mountain. And so we thank you that you are going to take the stories and use them for good, and that we will influence the influencers, and we will partner with your Holy Spirit and be a conduit of heaven. In Jesus' name.
Yes.
Amen. Awesome, you guys. Thanks so much for your time. And I will have links in the description here where you can go to donate, where you can go to learn more about all the films that they've produced. I know you have some on your website that people can access that way. If you haven't seen the films that we mentioned, they're all amazing. And a little birdie told me you were doing something with Brad Cummings. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he was one of the producers for The Shack. Is that right? Or
Yeah.
writer, or both?
Yeah. He was, well, he was kind of, I guess, a ghostwriter in a sense. I mean, he contributed to the book, but then also he was the producer on the film. And some of his,
which it didn't do very well, did it?
No, yeah, it did all right.
How many views did it get?
I don't know. It was like it did really well in the box office.
100 million or something.
Yeah,
it was I think
one of the,
besides The Passion, I think it was one of the top grossing Christian.
One of the top grossing.
I loved it for sure.
And
it was really good.
But then he also did the Founder's Bible with David Barton.
Huh.
And the Founder's Bible, if people don't know about this,
which is also printed in the U.S.,
is really cool. It's like a history book and a Bible kind of smashed together.
Wow,
it's amazing, and they did a really amazing job. He worked with David Barton and several other contributors. He was the editor-in-chief on it, and basically, just outlines like it's one of those like if you ever had like the Spirit Life Bible or something like that, where all of a sudden it's like you're reading along and like there's these little parts and articles inside of the Bible, and it's all of a sudden you'll get to this point in Isaiah where it talks about how this passage Christopher Columbus had in his journals, and
wow,
and then like this law or this thing that we do in the judicial system actually came from this part in Joshua, and stuff like that. So it's just a really kind of orients us back to an understanding of, we are in a Christian nation because it comes from the Judeo-Christian ethics and the universal law and the common law. So it's really cool.
So the project you and Brad are working on is kind of inspired.
I'm kind of inspired by that. Yeah.
So tease it out there.
A little tease.
Very good. Okay. Well, we'll put a link to that Founder's Bible as well. And we just are excited for you guys and look forward to hearing more over the years what God does with you and through you, and we'll celebrate together how his kingdom's advancing in arts and entertainment.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, thanks so much for your time, and we look forward to having you back again, hopefully soon.
Elizabeth. Thank you.
Talk to you soon.